Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the death of legendary actor Patrick Swayze. This is a very, what I would call, retro video, basically, because Patrick Swayze died in 2009, but it's kind of my way of, I guess you could say, it's paying a little bit of homage and tribute to him. That just because he is gone, he is certainly not forgotten, and his legacy will endure, I'm sure, for a very long time. Now, Patrick Swayze was a Leo, Sun in Leo, Leo Moon, and Virgo rising. And it's interesting, he passed away due to pancreatic cancer. He does have a number of indicators in the chart for susceptibility to it. I'm going to talk about natal placements and also transits that might have played well, I believe played a contributing role, astrologically speaking, to this. But first off, before I talk about that, I'll talk about a little bit basically about his chart. It's very interesting because having the Sun in Leo and a Virgo ascendant, even though they're very they're adjacent signs. They're close to each other. There's a semi-sextile actually between his Sun and Leo and Virgo ascendant, but they are really strongly different, and it's much different energy. His Sun and Leo, the basic character, obviously could be very flamboyant and extroverted, could be very attention-seeking. Then you have a Virgo ascendant, which is your astrological master facade, which is high, concealing the Sun, at least to some degree, which is more reticent, more humble, and shy, more shy and reserved and introverted. So I thought it was very interesting. So it tells me that he had a more reticent, more facade that was basically camouflaging a lot of that Leo energy, but he does have a lot of Leo energy in his chart. We saw it in how he was being a consummate actor. He obviously was great at performing. He was somebody that was certainly not afraid of the spotlight. He also had Pluto conjunct his Sun, which is really what I consider rather paradoxical aspect, because when you have Pluto conjunct the Sun, it can be a desire, it could be a strong urge to have fame and notoriety. And I mean, you have an extroverted, attention-seeking Leo, and then at the same time, it's also a need for secrecy. So it was kind of hard. What it tells me is that he had a little bit of some kind of conflict, whether he ever talked about it or not, but he desired to, I believe he likely desired to have private, to be very secretive, but at the same time he wanted the fame and he wanted attention as well. Sun in Leo, the Sun is about what we want in astrology, and this is about I'm sure he likely wanted a lot of the fame and the notoriety. So anyway, well, the thing is too, looking at his chart, I'm seeing some indicators as far as him, as far as having the pancreatic cancer now, and passing to another because of it, it's passing away. Well, the Virgo ascendant, now Virgo is associated with the pancreas, so anybody, the people that have a Virgo ascendant, obviously can have a certain propensity to having issues with the pancreas, because that is pancreas is associated with the zodiac sign Virgo, and having in the ascendant is the physical body. If you have whatever your ascendant sign is, you can have susceptibility to the debilitations that are associated with that particular sign, because the ascendant again is the physical body, and often there will be physical issues that you'll have that'll correspond with the sign on the ascendant. At this time too, he also had transit Saturn. When he passed away, at transit Saturn not far from his ascendant, so it tells me he likely had lost some weight during this time, and he was going to be experiencing more limitations in connection with the pancreas. Saturn was in Virgo at the time. Transit Sun was also in his 12th house, and when you have a transit Sun, I've seen this other times too, and transit Sun hits the 12th house, and And if somebody is already at a point where they're on the threshold of succumbing to debilitating illness, it could be another signifying factor in terms of the life ending, because the sun is connected with life. And the 12th house is a house of endings. It's about limitations and restrictions. Now, another thing I'm noticing too, as far as him in pancreatic cancer, he does have in his chart, he has Jupiter in Taurus in the 8th house. Now, Jupiter can be is associated with the pancreas, and the 8th house is death. And he did die due to that pancreatic cancer. The fact that it was in stubborn Taurus told me that this was more. I mean, it was probably more trying the fact that it's in a fixed sign, and it was more, he felt like it was more of a stubborn type of situation that wouldn't go away. I mean, in at least maybe how he, Patrick Swayze may have perceived this. Now, another thing too, what I noticed in his chart is that he also has Neptune in the first house. Neptune in the first house, that could, at times, that could manifest in the dissolving of energy, of the vitality. He has his sun, his natal sun is conjunct his 12th house cusp. That could be another indicator of even having the sun. If you talk about the sun in Leo, the sun in Leo can have near inexorable and indefatigable energy, but the fact that it's conjunct the 12th house, which is like it being in the 12th house, that could give limitations in that energy and vitality. Now, another thing with him, I noticed too, as far as his chart goes and natal placements and transits, he did have uh, Mars was in his natal chart is in Scorpio, and it opposes his Jupiter. Now, the fact that Jupiter in the 8th Taurus in the 8th house, so Jupiter in the 8th house, again, can manifest in a death due to pancreatic cancer, and also pancreatic, 8th house is the crisis house as well. He had Mars in Scorpio opposing it. It tells me that he fought likely relentlessly with a lot of emotional intensity, because it's at its opposite Jupiter. He was so opposed to it and wanting to and fighting. I'm sure he fought this to the bitter end, and sadly, unfortunately, did succumb to it. And it's also part of what I consider uh, a fixed Grand Cross configuration in his chart. I'm including the North Node in Aquarius. A lot of people may not consider the North the nodes as part or proponent of a Grand Cross configuration, but I do. I think it's still a very important component in one's natal chart. It's interesting that the Grand Cross configuration consists of Mars in Scorpio, and it also is the Sun, and you have the conjunction with Pluto and the Sun in Leo, and Jupiter in Taurus. Again, Jupiter, and when you're talking about a Grand Cross configuration in astrology, it's often what it is. It's been referred to as that cross to bear. It can give a lot of tremendous tribulation and adversity one may overcome, but it could also give inordinate willpower. He had it in fixed signs, so that gives more intractable energy and having more of a stronger will to deal with it. The sun in astrology can be about willpower. He had the sun being in Leo, very strong sign, of course, and he had probably very strong willpower as far as his inner, as far as his basic character goes. I understand he had a Virgo ascendant, which may have camouflaged a lot of that Leo sun energy, but still having the sun in dominant Leo tells me he had a very strong will. And also, what's interesting, you have Jupiter in this mix. Again, Jupiter being connected with the pancreas. Mars in Scorpio, this relentless fighting, and also of trying to combat it. Also, the sun being involved. The sun is about our life, our vitality, and then Pluto is about death. The North Node is about one's future. And the thing about this is too, but I noticed in his chart he also had Chiron in Capricorn in the 4th house of the end of life. Now, Chiron in Capricorn can give some suffering with despondency, maybe even depression or being melancholy. And it shows certain, it can indicate some suffering due to restrictions or limitations at that end or latter part of one's life. When he passed away, transit Pluto was in his fourth house of the end of life. Pluto Saturn can limit and restrict, but Pluto can flat out obliterate and destroy. And Pluto, perhaps in this case, a transit Pluto in the fourth house was something where it obliterated that end, that latter part of life. And he was 57 when he passed away. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, now another thing that I noticed at the time of his passing, he also had transit Neptune, at least in a loose and conjunct aspect to his ascendant. And the thing about it is, Neptune was also at least a loose conjunction to his north node, which tells me that's like that can manifest in some cases as the dissolving of one's future. And a thing too is he also had transit Chiron, at least a loose conjunction to his north node in Aquarius. And when you're talking about the north node being involved in a transit, um, what it is it can often manifest in issues one may have to confront or address. And this was about physical suffering, sadly. And the thing about it too is some people see Aquarius as illnesses that you can't eradicate or eliminate, but I really see Pisces as being the sign that's associated with it. Aquarius is more of an unusual nature. I don't think that this really applied to Patrick Swayze's situation, but how it may have manifested with him, the fact this was an Aquarius, it might have been something that came a little bit shocking or a little bit surprising. Maybe many people thought he was actually going to live a lot longer, and maybe what was happening is based on certain diagnosis shortly before his death, that many people may have been under the impression, and even Patrick, that he was actually going to live a lot longer. So maybe this was something that this was very shocking and really startling is what I'm thinking. But another thing too is what I noticed too in his, as far as his chart goes. Okay, he also at this time, his natal chart, he has Aries on the 8th house cusp, and that tells me that's another indicator of him. Really, it's not the legacy of being a fighter, but it can also be how he was going to be very combative in life and death matters, that he was going to combat something that may potentially take his life to the bitter end, and he was, and I'm sure he was fighting this to the very last moment, that he was going to combat death very strongly. There's really not much more I had to say as far as any natal placements or transits that might have been tied in to his passing. Well, another thing that I did notice is, as far as transits go, is that he did have at this time, he had transit Venus in Leo, had just passed his south node in Leo. When you're talking about the south node being involved in transit in astrology, it can be an indicator of what we're going away from. And the fact that transit Venus had just passed his his south node in Leo, that could be an indicator of going away from just enjoyment of entertainment, amusement, extroversion, his acting. The things that he loved was certainly connected with that, I'm sure, and really not much more else to say about that, except that the south node, he also, the transit south node in Cancer had recently passed his natal moon in Leo. And when you're talking going back to the south node in being involved in transit, it can reflect what we're going away from. The moon in astrology can be connected with it can be the soul, and it's what it is you're sadly that could be an indicator of the soul passing. The moon in Leo, one that was very perhaps extroverted, flamboyant, maybe would give the impression of grandeur from time to time, even if it was on a, I would say on a subconscious level, but keep in mind he had the sun and the moon in Leo, so even though they weren't conjunct, it's basically synchronized as far as the energy goes, as conscious and unconscious, very much working together, I would say. So anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to get at as far as any transits and natal placements in his chart that may have been tied in to his passing due to pancreatic cancer. And um, anyway, another thing. Well, one last thing I wanted to say is that having Pluto conjunct the Sun, I've seen this with some other people that when they have Pluto conjunct the Sun, it seems like in a lot of cases their life seems to end a little quicker than average. I mean, Pluto is about death, the Sun is about our life. He had Pluto at a critical degree at 21 degrees. And another thing I want to touch up on, the fact that his rising sign was Virgo. I've said this in previous videos and I'll say it again, not to be overly redundant, but Virgo and Gemini people, a lot of them seem to pass away quicker than average. Mercury and Gemini both ruled by Mercury. It's the wind. They sometimes come and go like the wind. Tupac Shakur, I know there's speculation he's still alive, but he is likely dead. He passed away at a relatively young age. He had a son in Gemini. Kobe Bryant, legendary basketball player, he was likely a son in Virgo, depending on his time of birth. He died due to a helicopter crash. Kurt Cobain, a Virgo ascendant, had committed suicide at like age 27. And another thing I noticed too, I think Kurt Cobain had his ascendant at 24 degrees Virgo, as well as Patrick Swayze did. That also puts the Dwad in Gemini. And Gemini is the sign that can come and go, sadly, like the wind. And it's ironic. Many of you may have remembered Patrick Swayze sang a song, something like "She's Like the Wind." It was kind of ironic that he was singing about that, something with the wind. And sadly, Virgo people and Gemini people often come and go like the wind, and they enter our lives quickly, but they can dissipate quickly as well, whether it's the figurative way or literal manner. My father was a Gemini with a Virgo ascendant, and he died due to Hodgkin's disease at like 38 or 39 years old. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay out.